We are going to start with our spring chocolate pairing. This is normally a seasonal chocolate pairing that we do at the winery, but here we are going to bring it to you virtually. And I'm joined by some special people on this taste along. So Tracy Dutton, hello.
Hello, everybody. Cheers.
And we have Kylie Dutton on with us. Hello.
Hi.
Yes. And of course, the fabulous Bobby Donnell is on with us. Hi.
Hello, everybody.
So we're going to start with the first pairing, which is our 2019 Fume Blanc. And for those of you who have the chocolate, we're going to start on this end, which is the Candied Apricot. Kylie, this wine has your name on it, so I'd love to start a question with you. We have not made a Fume Blanc before. Can you tell us what's the difference between the Fume Blanc and our Sauvignon Blanc, and why you and the team decided to make a Fume Blanc in this vintage?
Yeah, so you know, the Fume Blanc is different from the Sauvignon Blanc because it was done 100% in barrel. And what's unique about this Fume Blanc is that, so we picked 6 barrels that we chose to make the Fume Blanc with. And what's interesting about these 6 barrels is that they never left from the barrel from beginning of fermentation up until bottling. They stayed there the entire time. And I thought
I'd like to ask why the wine tastes that way based off of the vineyard and then your winemaking decisions. I'm gonna throw up on the screen the video that we took of the Sauvignon Blanc section of Shot Block from last week. And as I play that, I'd love to hear about the vineyard and your decisions here.
Okay. So the Shot Block Sauvignon Blanc, we usually pick a little bit earlier than what we call the Miss George that goes into our Kylie's Cuvée. So it's a little bit lower in alcohol, but a little bit higher in acidity. So the pH is usually on the lower spectrum, and the TA of the total acidity is a little bit higher. So it's when we put it into the new oak, that newer oak and the oak itself will help with that rounder mouthfeel. Also, the new oak present will kind of give it a perception of sweetness. Now, this wine doesn't have any residual sugar in it whatsoever, but the oak itself will bring a taste of sweetness to the palate and kind of lift the aromatics of, you know, the apricot. And even the other day I was tasting it, I was getting hints of kind of a toasted coconut kind of from the barrel as well. So I think the acidity from this vineyard and the fruit being the Muscat clone will kind of drive that tropical aromatics and really be lifted up by the barrels that we chose for the Fume Blanc.
Yeah. Let's move on to our second pairing. We are now going on to the 2017 Warren's Collection Chardonnay, and that is going to pair in here with our dried apple. I think to start talking about this wine, Tracy, I'd love for you to share about the vineyard here. I'm going to add the video again to the screen. When we were at the vineyard shooting last week, I noticed that as you drove around and walked around it, there looked like something like irrigation or piping overhead. So I'm very curious as to what that was, and also if you could tell us just a little bit more about the history of that vineyard.
Yes, this vineyard was planted in 1967 by my father-in-law, Warren Dutton, and hence this is the Warren's Collection Chardonnay. And so this, the 2017 vintage is actually made from 50-year-old vines. So you can see that the piping is going across each of the vineyard rows. And in 1967, the vineyard rows were planted in an east-west position and an 8x12 spacing. Spacing was quite wide back then because the farm equipment was a lot bigger. And so we replanted or interplanted other vines And now the spacing is a 6 by 8, and the rows are in a north-south position. So as the tractors actually have to farm through those vineyard rows, it's almost like the tractor drivers would have to duck to get underneath each of those irrigation pipes, and that's all there for frost protection. And we actually have much smaller farm equipment just designated for this specific block that is now 52 years old.
That's so interesting, just the evolution of a vineyard block. That's very, very cool. Bobby, does that play into the fruit that you get off this block and some decisions you're ultimately going to make when you make the Warren's collection?
I mean, for me, I'm really, it's more of like a green apple and kind of that bruised apple kind of note where it's starting to get really, really unctuous in the palate before we bring it in. And once that happens, you know, we pull the trigger and we bring in the fruit. Again, going back to the overhead sprinklers, if you're out there sampling early in the morning, watch your head, make sure you duck, because I've hit my head a few times in the morning walking through there before the sun comes up.
We are going on now to our 2017 La Familia Pinot Noir. And that, for those of you who have the chocolate pairing, is going to pair with the almond that's right in the center of your chocolate bar. Kylie, as I show the vineyard here, the Kozlowski vineyard, I would love for you to tell us about it, because this vineyard just really has a connection to your maternal side of your family. So I'd love to hear you share with us about this vineyard.
I can talk about the history. So the property was bought by my great-grandparents in 1949, and it turned into a Pinot Noir vineyard in 1998. Before it was a Pinot Noir vineyard, though, it was the largest raspberry farm in Northern California. Right here we get what we call a Primard clone from this Pinot Noir vineyard. Pretty earthy, big fruit characteristics. For me personally, I pick up some of those red raspberry characteristics, and that's why I paired it with the almond, because almond and red raspberries are a staple pairing, especially for desserts. So I thought that it went really well together.
Yeah. Bobby, what were some winemaking decisions that you made in 2017 with the La Familia?
The La Familia for me always has that, what I call that Primard spice, you know, that pepper, black pepper, white pepper, you know, that allspice kind of note, smaller berries. And so you really get that, don't get a lot of that big juice characteristic to it, although it does have a lot of raspberry and high tone cherry fruits to it. But I think the Primard really drives that spicy notes and more of those flavors that you look for in a Pinot Noir.
Then move on to another Pinot, which is our 2018 Berry Block Pinot Noir. And in the chocolate pairing, this pairs with the Cranberry. We are staying in the Kozlowski vineyard, but we're honing in on a section that's called the Berry Block. I'm going to play the video, and Tracy, I'd really love to hear you tell us about this, because you actually spent a lot of time at the Berry Block as a child, long before there was ever a Dutton Estate Winery.
Yes, I did. I pretty much grew up here there at my grandparents' ranch. And I spent all my summers going to Kozlowski Farms. I went to work with my mom all the time where she worked. And I picked a lot of raspberries here in this little section that we call the Berry Block. And I had my little punch card, and I was paid, I had my card punched every time I picked a flat of raspberries, and I was paid $1 a flat. And I, just walking through the rows, and I think I ate as many raspberries as I picked. So there's just a lot of great childhood memories, and raspberries is still today my favorite fruit.
That's great. That's really great. Bobby, I have a question for you. So historically, when we've harvested from Kozlowski Vineyard, we've been harvesting the Pommard clone. In this year, in 2018, when we harvested from the Berry Block, we harvested Swan clone. What is the difference between Pommard and Swan, and does a clone really make a difference?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the best way I had clones described to me actually was from Joe Dutton, where, an apple is an apple is an apple, but you have, Granny Smith, and you have, Gravenstein that's out here, and you have Golden Delicious. So everything is an apple, or everything is a Pinot Noir, but different clones will bring different flavors to it. So Swan will definitely bring different characteristics to the Pinot Noir, as Pommard will, as will 777 or 667 clones. And so they're all bringing different aspects to the wine and to the flavors, to the color, to the tannin structure, and everything else. And what drove me towards Swan is, one, I've never made it before and always wanted to, but it was, I think, what Sonoma County dubbed the suitcase clones. So these were brought into the county from other places like France and things like that in suitcases, and planted and budded over to see what it could really, how it would work here in Sonoma County. And I think in the 80s, the Swan really got popular, and I always wanted to do it. Never had the opportunity until I had Kylie in the truck with me, and I told her to block off the 5 rows that I wanted before Joe picked it and went to another winery.
We, for the final wine and chocolate pairing here, are going to do our 2016 My Father's Vineyard Syrah. And that's going to pair with the ground espresso. Tracy, I think that you're the perfect person to tell us about this vineyard, because when we say My Father's Vineyard, we're talking about your father. So I'm going to show some video of what this vineyard looked like last week, and I'd love to hear you tell us about it.
Yeah, this vineyard is actually just right in my parents' backyard and their side yard. And it's planted to the Syrah Noir clone, which is it's a very flavorful clone of Syrah grapes. It's cool climate. It kind of the vineyard sits in the Santa Rosa Plains, and so it's kind of low lying, so the ground fog kind of settles in there, but then all of a sudden it'll dissipate, especially during harvest time. So it really kind of gives it the great flavor and texture for a cool climate Syrah. And my dad is definitely helping Joe out in this vineyard with, whether he's disking or doing a few little things in the vineyard. It's great. It kind of gives him a little hobby and a little something to do along with Joe.
And Kylie, here the pairing is ground espresso with Syrah. So what is really the magic of this pairing right here?
So, my mom mentioned that she likes to pair this wine with, a steak like filet mignon, tri-tip, all, Bobby said bacon, big meats. But what a lot of people don't know is that the My Father's Syrah is essentially a wine that you could pair with a dessert, because it has all the characteristics of a dessert as well. And I remember the first time I ever had this wine with a dessert, I was at a winemaker dinner with my mom in San Jose, and we're looking at the menu, and we see that we were expecting like filet mignon, something super big and elegant meat-wise to be paired with this. And we're looking at each other, and he paired it with a chocolate raspberry mousse, and we're like, is this gonna go together? Like, we don't know, but we were served it, and it was the best pairing of the night, hands down. And espresso is a staple dessert, and that's why I thought it paired well with the Syrah.
Yeah, yeah.